Welcome to Live Laugh Talks, His and Hers with Mico. How you doing, Mico?
I'm great. Having a great week. How about you, James?
Oh, everything's been wonderful. Having a great week as well, and as always, even better when we're together. So happy that you are here today. So, a lot of times you and I will just sit around and talk about certain things and laugh and talk amongst ourselves. But now having a show where we can get on, talk to others, and get their feedback, that's definitely made it a joy for me. I know you feel the same.
Yes, most definitely. I just can't wait every week to sit on here and just collaborate and talk about all the events and things that's going on in the world.
I agree with you. I tell you, so much going on. But we were talking the other day. You mentioned something that I just thought was astonishing. I love where your head's at a lot of times, most of the time. And and this one was on his story, not history, his story. So I was astonished in your thinking, and gonna say at the onset that I think the audience will be as well. So why don't you share some of your thoughts and how you feel, and expound on the subject of his story?
Yes, because we always talk about history, but you know, it's really in the title itself, his story. It's
Hmm.
man's version of what the past has been. History is actually it's just the systematic study of documentation over the past of all the past.
Right.
But what documentation are we going off of when we talk about that? So my thing about history is I feel like history is something that is created by others. We don't really know what true history is. If you think about it, we've had so many wars and battles, and you think about when a country gets invaded, how they go in there and they tear down all the monuments and destroy all the paperwork and the documents and things that the people had because
Right.
maybe it's based off of religion or they have a different governmental system that they want to put in place. So they force the religion on people and they force their government on people. And from there, while you're giving somebody something that you feel like they need or they should have, they're also taking away their history.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And that's what happens because we've seen that. We've seen that with the wars that were fought in certain countries, and we saw that with Iraq with the fall of Saddam Hussein, and all of a sudden, they were taking down all of the monuments and burning down libraries, and
Yes.
so we hold our history as Americans as sacred. So it's important to hold the history of other countries as sacred as well, so
Right.
that it can be preserved and that type of thing. But that's not what happened. So the story gets retold
Hmm.
once the victor has all the spoils. So
Right.
they get to narrate the story from that point forward.
Right. And they get to tell it how they want to tell it. They're not going to tell you, oh, we lost this battle or this happened to us. They're going to give you all the good points of it. Think about you got into a fight. You don't tell somebody you got beat down. You want to tell the good parts of the fight. You know,
Exactly.
I got this lick in, or well, yeah, I might have lost that fight, but this is what happened and how it happened. You don't get the other
Right.
side. So I feel like we go to school and we learn all of these things and they teach us this, but we're learning somebody else's history. And we're not even learning true history. We're learning what they want us to know.
Exactly right.
So,
Exactly.
because nobody, I'm not going to say nobody's going to tell the bad stuff, but they don't want to tell the bad. Nobody wants to be looked at as bad,
Right. Right.
or that they've done something wrong. You want to have yourself perceived in the best light as possible.
And that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we go back and we even look at certain things that even happen in this country, like we just had, the holiday that went by, Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you look at the history or the his story, as you
Mm-hmm.
put it,
Mm-hmm.
it's not quite the the beautiful day depicted because there we go back and even when we watch certain movies or whatever, it's like the Indians were savages and the Pilgrims were these great people that just came over to have a nice meal, and
Mm-hmm.
and we just know the story is not like that at all.
At
It's
all.
not how it went down.
And
It's and we see the results of that day or those days to this day as
mm-hmm.
land was stolen, taken, and people put on reservations and all of this kind of thing. It wasn't, where it's just some lovely meal that took place and everybody's trying to be happy with each other. The story was definitely changed.
Was changed. But why? Because they don't want to be looked at in a bad light,
Right.
which is understandable. But and just think about, okay, so you talk about Thanksgiving. We also have Columbus. All of that came out about Columbus. His whole story changed. I was like, this is just like, is anything real? I'm thinking back to what I was taught in school. Like, you're taught these things, and then later on, they're like, oh, well, they didn't tell you this part. Oh, but they didn't tell you this. And you're like, man, is this true? And it's in books. You have to dig and search for these things. That's the crazy part. They don't. I realized also that they kind of twist the history, but also when the history is twisted, there's still true history in other books. You just got to dig for it.
Right.
They don't completely wipe it out. It's just kind of hidden.
Exactly.
So, it's just a wild thing. Just like the Library of Alexandria, how that was burnt down by Caesar. Sometimes you hear it was an accident, sometimes you hear it was done on purpose. But there was a lot of information in there that was lost. The whole
Correct.
library didn't burn down, but enough of it did that, a lot of pertinent information was lost.
Exactly. Pertinent information.
Yes. So we don't know what kind of history was lost, what kind of inventions might have been lost during that time that they.
Well,
Mhm.
I'm not. I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No.
when you're speaking of his story, and we're going back like that.
Mhm.
Even the history of African Americans,
Mhm.
because now it's just now. Like when I say now, it's right now that we're going back, and companies are starting to admit, okay, we didn't invent this.
Mhm.
It, it was an African American that invented this product,
Mhm.
and then they're trying to settle or make amends with the families involved.
Right.
That's sad because I mean, and, I have to turn around. I have to say, well, it's still good that the companies are coming forward with that kind of thing, but by the same token, why not decades ago? I mean, we go to let's just take for instance Jack Daniels.
Mhm.
We're just now finding out about Uncle Nearest, who invented it in the first place. But now, the Uncle Nearest alcohol is out. The proceeds go to the family of Uncle Nearest. But that was the invent. Jack Daniels was invented by his best friend, who they call Uncle Nearest. When I love watching certain channels because they get into that, like the food channels and stuff. I remember watching a one show that was about Dunkin' Donuts,
Mhm.
and they were talking about on this show that, and this was still, you know, really racist America. We're talking about the late 50s, early 60s. There was an interracial couple
Mhm.
who had their own franchise of Dunkin' Donuts. And so the wife, who was African American, would say to her husband and the representatives that came around, why do we throw away the middle part of the donut? Aren't we just wasting product?
Mm.
Everybody would just laugh it off and ha 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 and just keep doing what they've been doing.
Right.
So she went. So her husband one day said, what do you want to do with it? Do something that you want to do with it. So what she did was she took the middle and then she started fillings and different things with it. Certain types of sugars and changing it all the way up. Today we call them munchkins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest selling product of Dunkin' Donuts, actually invented by a black lady.
Bye, black lady.
And we never knew this. I mean, just now, as a matter of fact, they put it in their the owner put it in his biography.
Mm-hmm.
So that this all is just now coming out that and we can go on. Matter of fact, we're gonna do a podcast in the future on what happened to, all of these black inventions that are in the names of white corporations. We know because black people were property at one point in
Mm.
time. They could even own a patent. They weren't
Right.
wasn't supposed to even know how to read, much less anything else. But even after those times,
Mm-hmm.
they still wasn't given the dignity and ownership of things. We're now learning generations later.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of the civilization just waking up and digging back and trying to figure things out. Where before we just didn't care. You know what I'm saying? You were taught not to care.
Right,
Taught not to dig for things, not to, you like you said, we weren't supposed to read things like that. So now that we're better integrated into the society, we want to know more. We
right,
our past. So we start digging, asking questions, reading, um, investigating and things like that. I watched this one little thing, and it was the guy showed two circles, and one was red and one was blue. And he asked the students. I think it was he had to been in college or something. He was asking the students, um one of these he told the students, one of these circles is bigger than the other. And he said, raise your hand if you think it's the red one. You had some people raise their hand. And he said, raise your hand if you think it's the blue one. And some people raised their hand. And he said that neither circle is bigger than the other. Both circles are the same size. But do you see how easy it was for me to manipulate you? Just because I told you that the one circle was bigger than the other, you started second guessing that the circles were the same size. And he said that's
right,
society is, and that's what they do with our history.
right. I mean, and none of us was alive at the times that they're writing. I mean, we go way, way back.
Hmm.
So of course you can tell us anything,
Yeah, because I
and
mean,
that's the sadness of it.
yeah, there's nothing. You believe what you are told because, like I said, when we had that conversation earlier, if you're a child and your parents split up, whoever you end up with, that's the story that you know. You don't really know if you don't have that relationship with the other parent,
Right,
the other
and that's
side of the
that's
story.
too much of that too. That's some sad stuff where
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
where the kids just have no idea.
no idea
You
what's
know,
going on because you only know what somebody tells you. You're not born with information. People, you learn it.
right,
So,
right.
um, and that was my biggest issue with the whole history thing. I was like, you're learning somebody else's history. It's in the word, his story. It's like tell you, you
You,
know,
you know,
they
and
tell.
like you said earlier, what I appreciate about what you said is nobody wants to look bad. So when they tell their side of the story,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to look like they were just this wonderful person. An old friend of mine used to say, "There's two people, and then the truth lies somewhere in the middle."
Somewhere in the middle. Because everybody's going to tell a little bit of the truth, but nobody really wants to look bad. Even if you have someone say, because I'm a very truthful and honest person, but even in my truth, I'm still sugarcoating it.
Right,
You know what I'm saying? Because I still don't want you to really look, bad or down on me. So I'm going to sugarcoat it. Even if I'm telling you something bad, you're still not getting that, someone else might say it differently than what I'm saying it. And
Yes.
you might get that same story, but in a different tone or a different viewpoint, and you like, oh, that ain't how she told me. You
Right.
know, that's not what she said that, but she didn't say it in that way.
Right.
So, and that's what I'll be saying about history. When you're learning a culture's history or someone else's history, you're learning what they want you to know and the way they want you to know it. And I used to get
Exactly.
mad when I mean, think about all these books they're banning now.
And there's something.
You know,
Banning books. I never thought I'd live to see that,
hmm banning
but
books.
here we are.
Why? Because they don't want you to know certain things. The fact that Florida is out here changing the laws about what you can teach. This whole what is it called? The critical thinking, where learning about Black history and what really happened. Oh, they didn't ban that, and I don't even know how many states. You will not, and have told people that teachers that if you teach it, then they will stop funding them. So that's a
Yeah.
part of creating their own personal history, and people.
Yeah, but they had to get waking up, didn't they? Because they started talking about how slavery was, educational.
Yeah.
People learned to trade through slavery and all this, and the next thing they know, the vice president of the United States was landing in Florida. Like
Mhm.
she's like, no, no, we're not gonna be teaching these types of lies to our children.
Right.
That's not gonna happen. So yeah,
But
like you said earlier, the state could stop some funding of schools, but then the feds could stop the state's funding too. So
right.
it can get real ugly real quick.
But do you see what that took? It took, what I'm saying,
Right,
on the plane. But suppose it wasn't nobody on the plane.
right.
You know what I'm saying? You have a whole a rewrite of what really happened about to go down, and nobody's saying anything or nobody's doing anything or changing it. What else? You know,
I mean, and that's really nonsense
mhm.
when you think about it.
It is.
You know, you're gonna rewrite that type of history.
Mm,
Slavery
yeah, because
is
I don't want
educational. So why did you just send them to school? Why you had to whip them and with a whip and tie them up on chains and bring them over here in the worst ways possible and treat them worse than an animal to educate them? That don't make any sense. If we tried education like that today, we all be arrested.
right, right. And I was doing some more research, and I was like, you know what? We used to have world fairs.
Oh yes, oh yes. I love going back and reading about those
Yeah,
world fairs
the eight,
and some of the stuff that came out of it, like Cracker Jacks and stuff like that. That was, you know,
18.
at the World Fair, and today we just take it for granted. But back then, that was just innovation.
Right.
You know.
And that's when they brought you all of this new, all the new technology, all the new things. But I did some digging, and I was like, okay, I think it was about from 1812 to 1920, they were doing these world fairs. And I used to hear about the Chicago, well, World Fair all the time.
Right.
Um,
I think that was the biggest one, I
yeah,
believe.
so I kept hearing about it, but for some reason it never dawned on me. I mean, it is a world fair, but for some reason I didn't realize that they were having these fairs all over the world, literally. And
Hmm.
I was like, oh, so it wasn't just a world fair like here in one particular state. They had them in multiple states and in multiple countries during this time period. And I was like, wow. Then I started digging some more, and I'm like, okay. So come to find out, um I think they were building like 200 up to 300 buildings for these fairs.
Okay.
They were also the fairs. It would take 2 to 3 years, they claim, to build these buildings for the fair. They didn't make it out of concrete. It was made out of plaster and wood, according to them. So you would take 2 to 3 years to build this big, luxurious fair up, and then it only lasted for 6 months. And then after
Mm.
they would demolish all the buildings. So they would lose millions of dollars. But why would you do that?
Right.
Why would you have these beautiful, luxurious buildings up and all of these things up? You build practically a whole town, and then you just tear it down.
Hmm.
It just make you think like,
Yeah.
something about that just don't sound right.
What was they trying to hide? Is
Right,
what you
right.
got.
What are you hiding? And I can
Interesting.
go into a whole, world, down a little rabbit hole with that. But it's just the point that you only know what they tell you. They told you that they built these buildings in 2 or 3 years, but do you know they weren't already there?
Right.
And if something is made of plaster and wood, why do you have to burn it down and set off dynamite to make sure, what I'm saying, you destroying it, and all these
Wow.
wild and crazy things that I'm just like, and it was the place where they showed you these immaculate buildings that are better than the ones that they have their self now. They not even building like that. So they showing you these immaculate buildings. They showing you this is the time for them to show you all these great new inventions, all these things that we don't have that they're bringing out that's new. And I'm like, you know, the math ain't mathing. That's my favorite little go to. The math is just not mathing on this.
Right.
And it just took me back to history again. Like, wow, like we really don't know. All we know is what they tell us or what they allow us to know.
Yes, and it's deep what you're going into because I never really sat and thought about all that. I know when I went to Epcot Center the first time, we're talking about 1980.
Mhm,
And I was this little kid, and I was all in wonderment, and they had all of these uh, exhibits about the world fairs and stuff. I never sat and thought about, okay, well, why we tear all that stuff down?
mhm.
Just you know, that's that's deep.
Yeah,
That's real deep.
yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing these types of things up because that's what the show is about. It's about us just, having a conversation about things that maybe most people don't even think about. They just let it just go right over their head,
Mm,
and then here we are talking about it and bringing it to the forefront. You know, so but these that this is informative.
yeah.
I appreciate it.
Just
I mean,
give
we
people
need to
something
do more of it.
about. That's all.
You say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Wanted to give the people something to think about.
Yeah, you did. You did. That's definitely the truth. And but we got to think about all of that you talked about. We got to take history with a grain of salt because everything that we learn, like you mentioned, is not necessarily true. I know growing up, I would look at the history books and what was told, and I'm like, okay, well, who was doing the recording of these things? Are these people tell how do we know? Like there was that person sitting right beside Napoleon, and then he wrote this, and
Mhm.
I used to, but then I just put it out of my mind. Now that you bringing it up, I'm just, I'm going back to where my mind was as a child, and the curiosity that I had then, and the unanswered questions because
Mhm.
can't really answer those questions. We don't know who did what and who said what, and if it really went down the way that they said it went
The
down.
way they said it went down.
Because I growing up, we had all these monuments that we're now tearing down.
Mhm.
We had all these names on airports that we're now removing
Mhm.
because we're coming to find out that these people weren't good people at all. Why do they have monuments and why do they have their name on an airport
Mhm.
when some of these people had done some of the most or said some of the most horrendous things ever stated, and here they are with a monument. So
Yeah.
somebody was telling the story and wasn't telling it the right way, and now we're starting to find out the stories we were told were ugly
Right.
and hurt a lot of people for a number of decades.
We just changed. I think we changed like 6 military base names.
One, you know, one in Georgia, I think, one in North Carolina.
Mhm. I know the
So
one
they had,
here is Augusta is now it was Fort Gordon, now it's Fort Eisenhower.
yeah, see,
Mhm.
that was Fort Gordon my whole life and
Yep.
lives of others before me.
Mm.
It's been Fort Gordon a long time. Matter of fact, Fort Gordon has its own part of Augusta. I mean, it's like Fort Gordon, Georgia. That's
Now think about that. In about 50 years, people will it'll be a complete memory. You know what I'm saying? For the older generation, where the younger
right.
generation will have no clue that it was ever even named Fort Gordon. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
How they can just wipe,
Right.
you know what I'm saying, change the whole, people say, "Oh, that's in the past. Leave the past in the past." The past is how you learn and how,
Right.
figure out what not to do again. But if you're never told the right things and it's all manipulated, how do you really learn from that?
It's exactly right.
And I
I was having that Go ahead.
mhm.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that I think that's a part of why we're having this issue in America right now. You know, a lot of people don't want to go back down that road because they feel like it's painful, it's hurtful. Or why do we have to go back down that road? And why do we have to teach this if it's not going to do anything but cause problems? But it's not about teaching it to cause problems, it's teaching it so that we don't go back down that same road again or that pathway again.
It's painful and it's hurtful for those who lived through it or died during it, and their children. So sometimes we, like you just said, we have to experience the pain
Mm-hmm.
of the things that happened in the past, so that as you eloquently put, and as put in a monument in Poland, don't let what happened to us happen to you.
Right.
And I had the chance to see that monument, and it's as big as a football field, and it's just ashes
Mm-hmm.
in it of people who were burned, or, gassed to death, or, all the horrendous things. And we got to talk about slavery because as you know, I'm in education. I love the kids, and I love volunteering at the schools, and I love being there. But we have a very passionate educator, and he, in his passion, was talking to his students about slavery,
Mm-hmm.
and he's African American, and there were a number of African American students in the class saying to him, "Why we gotta learn this? What we gotta go over this for? What they gotta do with us now?"
Mm-hmm.
And as he said, he told me that the Caucasian students in the class
Mm-hmm.
were not questioning anything. They were wanting to learn.
Right.
They were enthused. It was the African American kids who didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them I had a chance to talk to because he walked over into the classroom I was in, and he was telling me about what happened in the class. And he was one of the ones who said, "Well, we got to learn this for." So I told him, I told him, you know why? Because 4 million people died
Mm-hmm.
so that you can sit in this school next to Caucasians and get the same education.
Right.
They didn't even have a chance of education. If they were asked the question, what does this word mean? And this black person could answer the question, they would kill. You weren't supposed to be able to read,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But now you're being educated just like your Caucasian counterparts of the same age group.
Right.
And I told him, I said, then there's another 4 million people who didn't even make it.
Mm-hmm.
They died on the slave ships coming over here from diphtheria and all the other hard, hurtful, and harmful things that happened to them. They didn't even live to make it, or they jumped off the ship and rather death over slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about 8 million people who cared about you, who cared about their kids in the future, who wanted better.
Right. Right.
That's why you need to learn. And if we don't go back and we don't look at our history, we'll make the same mistakes again.
Right.
Because, and like I explained to him, America is a powerful nation because it was built without a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
You had slaves building it. And then for generations down to this day, those slaves, the children of those slaves, still have nothing.
Right.
And like I told him, I said, your grandparents, did they leave your parents anything? No.
Mm-hmm.
Will your parents be able to leave you something? Will you be able to leave your kids something? Because I don't care, how bad you don't want to learn about slavery. Generationally, you and your family have not been equal to other families who gained from slavery. There's people who were victims of slavery, and there's people who gained from slavery. And generations, they still rich. They still passing on land and money and gold and all this to the next generation and the next generation. generational wealth,
Generational.
whereas you have generational poverty. That is true history. You've been learning his story or nothing
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't want to learn.
Right.
But if we don't sit back and we don't take that painful lesson, we don't go back and revisit what happened, all of this could happen all over again because we've already seen. I was having this conversation with my father, and I said it with a smile. We've already seen how one amendment to the Constitution can be removed.
Mm-hmm.
How far away are we from removing other amendments?
Correct.
The end of slavery is an amendment. It ain't the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. It's not. It's
So many other things are amendments.
amendments. Yes.
And that's why you need to learn this, son. And I told him, I said, you know what? We're walking in a world today in which we have no black leaders.
Mm,
You know, let's talk about history. We lost Martin Luther King before you and I was born. We lost Malcolm X. Jesse Jackson is old and
mm-hmm.
and frail at this point in his life. Lived a beautiful life, but he's not able to lead. Al Sharpton is spending most of his time going to funerals of his friends that were leaders. We lost John Lewis. I mean, we go down the list of all the ones we lost. Where's our leaders? And not just African Americans at this point. We don't even have leaders of the country who are not 80 years old.
Mm, mm, mm.
Where's that? Where the leaders your and my age? Or even a generation back?
Mm-hmm.
Where? So we don't even have leaders. And I told him, I said, you're a very personable person. All the other kids love you, and I love talking to you. You're fun to be around. But did you ever think about you can be a leader, but you can't be anything if you don't know history?
There it is.
You don't want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
What can you be without knowledge?
Without.
And you know what that young man did? At 14 years old, he hugged me.
Yeah.
See, I never thought about it.
What is that? Not
I
power.
just never thought about it. You know, so that's why I think like having a conversation like we're having is so important because not only do people go and rewrite history, but some people don't even want to learn it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Even the stuff that's been rewritten.
Mm.
to Because if you don't want to learn it at all, how can you dispute what was written?
Right. Mm-hmm.
How can we? You can't dispute his story if you don't even know history.
Right.
So it's sad. Sad world we live in. I literally believe that this generation don't want to learn anything about the past generations. And I see it even on a, I know I'm just talking now, but I see it in a small level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can bring up an artist. I was in, in a classroom and one of the teachers was talking about kid and play,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so the kids was like, who is kid and play? So he had to like literally bring up a video, which made me feel old, a kid and play, kicking around and, in house party. So I'm just like, but that's just, I mean, that's not 6, 7 generations back. That's just, a generation right before these kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here thinking like when I was a kid, I wanted to learn about the artists in the past. So I wanted to learn about John Lee Hooker, BB King, people that came up before me, or James Brown, all these other people. I wanted to know them.
Mm.
I wanted to understand Otis Redding. I wanted to get it. This generation don't want to get anything. They don't care anything about anything further back than yesterday.
Right. Yeah.
If it didn't happen in their lifetime, they don't care.
And it's
What a
important.
world.
It's so important.
What a world. But anyway, as you and I delve into this subject, I'm so glad again that you brought it to our attention. And we all want to delve further and gain more knowledge of the truth that happened,
Yes.
and not just what somebody told us happened with the his stories
Mm.
instead of history.
Right.
So we want to definitely delve in there. We don't want to be like that young man, how he was at first, and then want to learn it, didn't want to learn. We want to learn, so so we can pass on the true story to the next generation.
Right. Most definitely.
Thank you, Miko, for this. And we want to continue to move forward in the show. It's gaining momentum, and what we're going to do. We talked about it amongst ourselves. We're now going to inform you guys. Is instead of doing the three live laugh talks and then adding in the one his and hers, we're gonna just we're gonna still have three shows.
Right.
Except we're gonna have the his and hers that'll lead off the week on Mondays. It's gonna lead off, and then we'll have the live laugh talk rather regular shows on Wednesday and Friday, and also that way we think it will keep confusion down because you know two shows releasing on Monday might have been a little confusing. So we're gonna just have the one, his and hers, kicks off all of the Live Laugh Talks. I think that's because this show is gaining so much momentum. People enjoy hearing two voices instead of one,
Mm.
and I do too. Um, and also, we're still going to talk Miko into one of the shows during the week coming on and just being with us that entire show. It's
Okay.
going to be on Wednesday and Friday. So Monday we'll have it with Miko, and then hopefully on a Wednesday or Friday she'll come along and just be there the whole time,
Okay.
which will
Yeah,
be
we can
a
definitely do that.
joy for me.
Yes.
So I look forward to that. So as we say at the end of our show, in love. Say good night, Miko.
Good night, Miko.